Welcome back to What is Awakening. My name is Mark, and today we're going to talk about self-deception. Now, the reason I got the camera on me today is because we're talking about self-deception. I thought it'd be good to have the camera see my face as I'm talking about my own self-deception. And after that, we'll go back to the POV glasses to where when I do talks, you can see what I'm looking at instead of seeing me. All right, so the reason I want to talk about self-deception today is because I see that as our actual practice of awakening. Recognizing our true nature is recognizing confusion, recognizing self-deception. So, and as I've told you the story before, I recently had a whole life change. I quit my job, picked up trading, crypto trading, have no idea about trading. So it took me on an adventure. It took me on an adventure of my own self-deception, of unconscious self-deception that I didn't know was there. So just to review for everybody, I was at the point in my life where I wanted to go deeper into the teachings. I wanted to be a better host for the host. So I decided to start all over with the teachings, with the Buddhist teachings, Dzogchen teachings in particular. So in the spirit of that, the spirit of it was to stabilize, because that's our only practice. Our only practice is awakening, recognizing our only awakening, and stabilize in that awakening. So any practice of awakening is stabilizing. And the way to stabilize is to recognize confusion, recognize self-deception, recognize anything, just recognize. So my trading took me on a journey for self-deception, or to discovering my own self-deception, because I never knew anything about money, never had any interest. But because I quit my job and got into trading, I had to learn it, crash course. So I had to learn all the videos of trading, technical analysis, and the trading psychology. And now when I say it revealed forms of self-deception that I didn't know I had, what I mean is the same thing that I talked about before, is that we have gross forms of ignorance, and then we have very subtle forms of ignorance. So the subtle forms of ignorance would be more of our unconscious ignorance. So on a conscious level, we're very aware of our confusions, our limitations. Everybody reminds us of them. We're aware of them. But there's also unconscious limitations, ignorances that we have. And this trading, the trading psychology, the very nature of it, because it's based on human nature, it was a practice that brought up all these subtle forms of confusion that I had. And just to give you a couple examples of it, what I mean by that is, let's say, a couple things. Okay, so one of them would be, in terms of self-deception, what I noticed is, when I say you, it's I. When I don't want, if something was uncomfortable for me in terms of the trading, if I was involved in a trade and I wasn't feeling comfortable in it, I could switch the screen to see different time frames. And that's what I mean by you. When anyone's looking at trading, you're supposed to go through different time frames and look at different, let's say, zooming out, different perspectives of where the market is. But what I was noticing was that because I was feeling uncomfortable, that's when I was changing my frames of reference. Things were looking bad there. I did not want to feel that way. So I switched it to a different frame of reference that made it look better. And with trading, the thing is, you'll find out the wrong way that you're practicing self-deception, because you'll lose. I mean, your technical analysis will fail you if you do not practice the trading psychology with it. So little things like that. And if that's not clear enough, if no one's familiar with trading enough to know that, another form of self-deception I learned was, let's say, greed. I had no idea that I was greedy. I had no idea that I had a lot of these unconscious limitations. And let's take greed, for example. So I never thought of myself as a greedy person. However, trading revealed that. And it revealed that through, let's say, you're in a trade, your technical analysis, takes you to a point that you're in a winning trade. And instead of getting out of that trade, let's say you're up $1,000, and instead you continue to, let the trade go up, and what happens is the trade and ultimately ends up coming down, and you end up walking away with half of the amount of that you could have. And it's things like that that make you realize unconsciously that's greed. That's a form of greed that we just don't recognize. That I didn't recognize until you have this. You have to face so many times of these mistakes that you're making. You have to face it. You have to see what you're doing wrong. So trading made me face these things, and then I'm able to recognize, wow, there's all kinds of unconscious greed, all kinds of unconscious avoidance, and that's what I really want to get back to, is because that seems to be the way we've been conditioned in human nature, is to avoid any types of unpleasantries. And I don't know if this is just a Western mind thing or if this is a human thing in general, but definitely in the Western mind, we and I've never recognized this as much until now, we avoid any unpleasantries as if they weren't a natural fact of life. Like I told you in the last podcast, how we have the March winds, then the spring rain, and then the May flowers with the allergens and whatever irritants you may not like about spring. But all these things are natural, but we think we could avoid them. I've noticed in our collectiveness, we think we could avoid any type of unpleasantness, and that's where I think a lot of our anxiety is from, is just avoiding the very necessary, spontaneous, and natural unpleasantries of life, the comings and goings of life. But more importantly, what I learned from the experience of trading was the sense of will. I really noticed that's where the sense of suffering comes from, because I never had to learn anything. I never had to concentrate. I never had to behave the way I had to do that I had to with trading, because it's your job to learn, it's your job to care, it's your job to be invested. You're an investor, it's your job to be invested in it. And for 20 years I had been not invested in anything. Just the opposite, letting go has been my feeling for the last couple decades. So this act of concentrating, this act of learning, this act of wanting and willing, and willing, let's stick with that, because that's the essence. What I learned is by taking things seriously, learning and taking things that focused, that's what introduces the sense of will. The sense of will. Notice I say the sense of will, because I don't experience any will. There's just a sense of will, and that's where I think our suffering comes from. The great suffering, the great weight we feel. And when I say that, when the weight that we feel with our will to help our friends, the will to help our family, the will to change the world, the will to have our political ideologies manifested, the will to have our ideologies about the environment manifest, or whatever our will is about the world, the environment, to change, to influence, to control it. That's the root of our suffering. And the best way that I could describe it is the sense of Atlas. The sense of being Atlas, of having the whole world on your shoulders. That's the feeling that we walk around with all day long when you're concerned with, everybody in your orbit, your family, your friends, your coworkers, like I said, whatever political ideologies you have, or environmental ideologies, or spiritual ideology, whatever ideologies you have about the world, that's a great weight. Like Atlas, carry the burden of our will change the world, to influence the world, to control the world, to somehow, make our effect on it. And it reminded me of the Christian quote, let's say. And again, if anybody's not familiar with me, I don't know anything about Christianity, but I do notice that all the deep things that I come up with spontaneously always reminds me of a quote from the Bible. And like I said, I've never read anything about the Bible, so just take these quotes as if people were generally talking about quotes you hear on TV. These just don't belong to Christianity, they belong to the public knowledge. These quotes are, so big. All right. So the idea in Christianity that God gave us free will, God gave us free will, and like I said, forgive me if I'm wrong, but what comes with this sense of free will, and I say sense of free will, I don't know how it's worded, sense of will, is accompanied with good and evil. And so for me, that would mean discriminating and awareness, the ability to make between good and bad, the ability to prefer, the ability to, it basically roots from the sense of self and other. When you have this sense of self and other, that's the sense. It's the same thing to me as a sense of good and evil. There's something you want to preserve and something you want to push away, something you want to turn away, things you want to attach and things you want to avoid. So to me, that's all good and evil. When I hear good and evil, that's what I hear, is just discriminating awareness of preferences and choice, of protecting the self, building the sense of self, the sense of self. So the sense of will is simultaneously the sense of self and other. Okay, so God gave us a sense of will, or I think, and like I said, I don't know the Bible, but I'll bet you it's probably something like God gave us the choice of either a sense of will, an option, and that's what I've gotten. I'll bet you that's what's it. I'll bet you the Christians are saying God gave us an option for a sense of free will. And what comes with that sense of free will is the good and evil, the concept of good and evil, preferences and choices. But that's an option. And I think what the Bible is telling us is that the grand option is that we don't have to take the sense of will. We could defer the invitation to the sense of will and remain as, now let me find a piece of paper that I could bend to show you what I'm talking about. So using my analogy of God, so all we have is God, and this is the grand option that we have, the choice to see either self and other, or to see it as just God. It's our choice. We could either see what's presented to us, which, by the way, if nobody's familiar with my paper analogy, the way I see it is all there is God, or we'll see aware space, and the very nature of aware space is to be aware, which would naturally make it aware, and like I said, seemingly of itself. The trick is whether you see it as an other, self and other. Either it's awareness, recognizing for awareness what it is, there's only awareness, or God as God, or if we mistakenly see it as a self and other. That's the invitation. I think that's the option that we have, that's presented to us, is to indulge our sense of will. That's it. To take the invitation of a sense of will, to indulge the sense of will, and to build upon it, and to build a sense of self, and all these other things. I think that's the grand option that's presented to us. But what happens at a certain time naturally, and that's the whole thing, is naturally. The reason why for 20 years I went on vacation and said I didn't care was because I realized it's inevitable. I don't think enlightenment is something we have to work towards and hopefully we'll get it. I think it's the natural design of it. So what do I want to, the imposter, yes. So I want to leave off with, because of this, because of the design of the self and other, and because of all this is God, we're going to feel a sense of being an imposter. The ego senses it's an imposter. So if you do have the sense, if you've taken the option of will, of the sense of will, and you think you're in will, and you think you're in control, and you're controlling, you have some control over the environment, or even of yourself or anything, then that means this, you have the self of self and other. But the self that you're thinking that you are, it's an imposter. And on a deep level, you know it's an imposter, because that just means you're thinking the ego. What you think of as the ego, that's what you mostly identify with as you, but it's an imposter. It's a shadow of what it actually is, which is awareness. Just awareness. All there is awareness. So of course the sense of self would take on a characteristic of awareness to be alive, to be sentient, to be conscious. But it's not. Ego is just a process. It's just thinking. It's just organizing. It's just, like I said, discriminating. Yes, that's what I said. So the sense of being an imposter, the sense of feeling an imposter, naturally is going to bring us to the spiritual practice of wanting the silence, wanting the stillness, something thirsting for something other than the movement. And I just noticed my podcast went over 15 minutes, so I'm going to try to keep these short. So I'm going to end it here, guys. Real quick, short podcast. That way I'm going to do them. I want to try to do them even every day. I know it's been a week, so at the minimum I'm going to make sure I do it once a week. But I want to try to do this all the time, so just try to make them more spontaneous. So that's it. Until next time. Hey, by the way, ask questions. Anything you want to ask, participate. I'm going to start some guided meditations too. I don't know if I said that last time. Maybe I'll talk about this on my next talk. But I'm really seeing the effectiveness of giving guided meditation. So we'll talk about that. Talk to you later, guys. Have a good one. Bye-bye.